What's up, fam? Modern Day Caveman here. So someone asked me a question. They asked me, why do guys keep going back to prison? So I thought I would I can't really answer for everybody. I can only answer for me. So I went to prison 4 times, right? So the first time I went to prison, it was when I shot that guy and I took a plea bargain. And when I went to prison, I went to prison for a year. Well, I wasn't even a year. It was only 89 days. They sent me to prison. They gave me a number, and then they kicked me out on what they call shock probation. So the one thing that I didn't know when I took that deal is all the stuff that was going to happen after I became a convicted felon. And so when I came home to Alliance, Ohio, I tried to go get a job. I literally tried to go get a job, but everybody was saying no, because I had just shot that guy, and they said I was violent, and I couldn't even get a job as a telemarketer. Like, I remember couldn't even get a job. So that was in '89 when that happened. When I came home in '89 and '90, I think it was the beginning of '90, and crack had hit. And so I started selling drugs. That's exactly what I started doing. And the next thing that happened was I got caught with a gun, and I went back to prison again for having a gun. That's what I went back to prison for, just for having a gun. And when I got out that time, I filled out. I made 100 copies of my resume. I remember this. I made 100 copies of my resume, and I ran around to everybody, giving out my resume, going to fill out applications, and every time I came back, it was always, we don't hire felons. We don't hire felons. So I remember one time, there was 2 times. I'm going to tell you 2 incidents. The first incident was I lied on my application, and no, I ain't even telling. I'm going to tell you the first incident. The first incident was with Debo. I remember it was Debo, and they needed a dispatcher or something like that, and they interviewed me. And they loved, I gave them my resume. They did everything. Then we had the interview over the phone. And so what I did on the question was, have you ever been convicted of a felony? I left it blank. And so when they called me and we were having an interview, she gave me my start date and everything. So she was like, oh, I see you left this question. Like, you've never been convicted of a felony. So I said, well, actually, I have. And so she was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry, we don't hire felons. And that was it. That was they had actually hired me on everything except for the felony. So I was like, wow. The second incident, I was working at Big Lots. Well, I got the job at Big Lots because I lied on my application and said I was never convicted of a felony. And right when I remember I was a cashier, and they were getting ready to start this furniture department, and the manager came to me and asked me if I would be willing to start it, be the head of the furniture department. And I was like, yeah, sure. But I broke clean with him and told him that I had lied on my application about being convicted of a felony. And he was like, I told him the whole story, and he was like, you know what? He was like, man, I'm glad you're being honest. He said, I'm gonna go back in there and fix it. That's okay. We'll still accept you. And I was like, cool. But then the next day, he gets transferred to another store in another district. He becomes district manager of another store, and he never gets to change it. And the new manager does an audit and sees that I lied on my application, and he's tripping. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, man, this this dude calls the police, right? He calls the police, and he calls me in the office. Tells me that, hey, I give him my ID and my smock and all this, and he was like, get out of here, you got to, and I was like, what? And he had the police escort me off the premises. So that's that. And so now I'm out again without a job, and I'm like, it's crazy. So I started selling drugs again. That's what I knew, selling drugs. And I go back to prison. I get caught. What happened? How do I get? Oh yeah, I get caught up with this girl, right? This girl, this stripper. That's what happened. I get caught up with a stripper. Ain't it always strippers, girls and drugs, right? Girls and drugs. I get caught up with this stripper, and we start dating, and I ended up moving in with her. And it turns out that she's a crackhead that I didn't know, and the long story short is that she set me up. She set me up to get me out of the way because she was having an affair with a cop, and it's a big old mess. I'd have to tell you that story, but anyways, the long story short, very short version is she set me up, sent me back to prison for 3 years. Right now, at that time, when I was with her, I did have a job. I was working with construction with a friend of the family. Actually, he had gave me a job as a construction. I was at the gas station I was just coming from the dentist office. They had just pulled this tooth out of my mouth because I didn't have dental. I had a medical card, and I didn't have. The medical card that I had didn't cover fillings. It only covered extractions, right? And so they pulled this tooth because I had a cavity that I couldn't get filled, and it was killing me. So they just pulled out a tooth in my mouth. Like, it was a perfectly healthy tooth, but it was killing me. I couldn't do nothing about it. I needed, it was. But anyways, so RB, he gave me a job, and I was working construction, and I was living with this girl, and all of this whole mess just happened with her, and I went to prison, right? And so I went to prison for 3 years. I came out, and I was living with my father. And I don't know, for those of you that know me, they know that the situation with my father was toxic at best. and I ended up on the run, and I ended up in Texas, homeless, hungry, and decided to rob a bank just to get some money. And it was a bad decision. Actually, all my decisions were bad, to be honest. If I made bad decisions, right? I made bad decisions. It goes back to the art of asking for help, because I didn't ask for help. I thought I could do it on my own, and I was making these decisions thinking that I was going to be able to do it on my own, and in reality, I couldn't. I ended up going back to prison because of my bad decisions. I was in bad situations, so I don't fault anybody. I'm not saying that it's anybody's fault other than mine that I went to prison, but when you're in circumstances and you're faced with these decisions, you don't even know, you don't make rational decisions. I mean, that's the bottom line. I didn't make rational decisions because I was not in a rational situation. And if I'm honest, the only time, like I always say, the only time that I did something that I deserved to go to prison for is when I robbed that bank. Like, I really deserved to go to prison for robbing the bank because I knew what I was doing. I knew the consequences. I knew what could possibly happen, and I did it anyways, understanding the ramifications if I get caught. The first time I went to jail, I didn't expect to go to jail. I thought it was a self-defense case. Like, I still think it's a self-defense case, and I don't have, please don't take this the wrong way, but I don't have any remorse about shooting that guy because I think they would have killed me if had I not shot him. So, but it sent me to prison, and that changed I always say this, it changed the trajectory of my life, because when that incident happened and I became a felon, I also became a second-class citizen, and I lost kind of rights and privileges and stuff. You remember, I don't know if you know, but when I caught that case, I was set to go to the service. Like, I had enrolled in the service. I was leaving. The reason why I was out in the first place was because this was my last weekend, and I was shipping out on Wednesday. And so now that I became a felon, I couldn't go to the service. The colleges didn't want me anymore because I had full scholarships offers for wrestling, and it just changed everything. So like I said, I remember I told you, I said I didn't become criminal-minded until I went to prison. And then that's when I realized that I had this criminal mentality. Excuse me. But, I can't speak for everybody else. I can only speak for me. I made bad decisions. Right? Bad decisions is what led me to prison. Is why guys keep going back. To be honest, some guys feel more comfortable in prison. Like, there was a time where I remember there was a time when I was going back to prison, and I was like, cool, I'm good, I can handle it. It was like, it's cool. And there was another time you know, coming up, where going to prison was like a rite of passage for black men. You know, you got to go to prison or you ain't nothing in the streets, you know, and I was in the streets. So that's my reasoning. And I want to thank Sammy for asking that. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you for asking that question, because, you know, we don't really, nobody really knows the true meaning why people keep going in and out of prison. But I can only speak for me. Like, I can't speak for everybody else. I just know that, like, my situation is I made bad decisions. And I'd say 90% of the guys that go in and out of prison just make bad decisions. So that's my answer. You know, I got to say it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to hit the notification button. All right. Hey, remember, God loves you, so do I. Peace, one love.